Essentially what we've done is we've built a network of infrastructure and resources. And what we do is we help device manufacturers in the medical device space service their products once it's been deployed. So once it's gone through the NPI or the commercialization process and sold, what we've seen is a lot of device manufacturers may not have the bandwidth to be able to support the products once they've been placed out in the field. And so we kind of identified that as a potential area that we can assist them. So we try to have them leverage a lot of our service centers that we have placed globally, as well as our field service technicians to do quite a few different things. So installing product in a doctor's office or in a hospital, that helps them generate revenue quicker. And then obviously if there's simple maintenance issues or corrective actions that need to happen on these devices, sometimes the device manufacturers have limited bandwidth to be able to support their technology on the field. So we're trying to help them create a better experience to their end users by giving them access to our technical teams to help service their products.
Would a short sentence on that be, we are your outsourced field service engineers?
Field service, yep, depots and logistics. We really handle the end-to-end process. Yeah, depots. Yeah, so
sorry,
our products, sometimes
I don't recognize that term.
You haven't heard that. So it's basically like a service center. Some products are fairly complicated and they can't be taken apart out in the field.
You mean depot, D-E-P-O-T?
D-E-P-O-T, D-E-P-O-T.
Okay.
Depot, Home Depot.
Yeah.
Think of it like Home Depot, yes.
I don't know. Maybe it's just a cultural
thing. Tomato. It's a Northwestern thing. It's that Northwestern thing.
It must be. Okay.
Yeah. So
and so we don't know, yours is not a small company.
Yeah. So again, we've built this network globally, and I think one of the fundamentals of our organization that gives us access to a lot of medical device manufacturers is the fact that we have inherited and adopted a very robust quality management system, which is very important to medical device manufacturers. So building that trust and understanding the quality systems and the requirements that are required from a traceability standpoint are very important. So we've built that within our overall operation. And so it's really easy for us to kind of engage with medical device manufacturers in building these partnerships to help give them access to different markets that may be challenging for them. So you can take a couple of different examples, right? If you look at like a startup company nowadays, they have an amount of capital to work with. And really what we're trying to do is allow device manufacturers that we partner with to refocus or repurpose their capital on things that are more important to them. And what we consider that to be is building innovative products, R&D engineering, as well as working on the overall customer experience, the customer communication that they have. So service execution, service delivery is a necessity, but a lot of times it diverts a lot of important capital to building up field service teams or these types of brick and mortar service centers that may need to be created to support your customers, right? So why do our customers have to invest their capital in that when we've already done so? And so it allows them to really take advantage of this infrastructure that gives them what I'll call an outcome-based type model, where they can entrust us to service the devices on their behalf and deliver a product back to their customer in working condition and ensure that there is no issues. And this is all run by our quality management system, 1345, 9001. We have that all embedded into our systems.
It seems broad. There's a lot that you do. And
yes.
I'm a simple man. I want to be able to tell my friends, oh yeah, I was talking to Pasha the other day. So if you are a blank and you need blank, you should totally call him. What would you say?
Yeah, aftermarket service provider for device manufacturers. That's probably the
competition.
It's interesting that you say that. So if you look competitively, there's a lot of contract manufacturers that build products for device manufacturers, and they, as a necessity of their business, they're providing a lot of the services because they built the product. Now, these contract manufacturers are very good at building products. The feedback that we get collectively from a lot of our clients that are OEMs is that it's not always ideal. The response times are not always ideal in terms of turning product around because, again, these contract manufacturers are really focused on output, building products, not necessarily ingesting defective products or issues, with products that are coming back from the field. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of different contract manufacturers that dabble in this space. There are regional providers that do field service. Some of them don't exclusively work with OEMs. They do work with end users and what we call is like a third party service. That's a little bit of a different business model than we have. Our relationships are exclusively with our OEM clients. And so we go out and we only work on products that OEMs have essentially trained us and certified us to support on their behalf. And so that means we're handling all of the documentation, the device history record, completion, any checklists that they have. It's all essentially done in accordance with their SOPs, their statement of procedures.
Where's a publicly traded company?
We are not. We're privately held.
How many are you?
Well, just if you look at our overall infrastructure, we're probably about 600 strong. And we have two different field service groups too. So I'm going to kind of break it down for you. It's interesting right now what we're seeing in the field service space because, I think one of the other panelists mentioned about connected care into the cloud, right? So we're seeing a lot of IT convergence with medical devices. They're not these siloed devices any longer. So one of the unique attributes of our organization is that we have an IT business practice as well. And this is we're doing global infrastructure support for a lot of medical device manufacturers that have specialized applications, like in the imaging space. If you're familiar with radiology, when you go get an MRI, everything now is digital, right? So you get a digital scan, and those images are flowing through networks and servers, and they are sitting on storage devices in a lot of these hospitals. And so the majority of that market today has outsourced the IT support of the hardware infrastructure to our organization. So we're actually doing on-site break-fix work on what I'll call off-the-shelf IT equipment that's running their critical applications in these hospitals. And so this is essentially responding on a 24/7 basis. So we've essentially been given that responsibility for a lot of these device manufacturers that have critical IT equipment running their applications.
Jose's my go-to for anything mobile. When he comes off mute, he can tell us. Do you have clients that Pasha's just described, basically, that more and more of their service issues are IT based and they may not have an optimal setup to address them?
A little bit. I mean, I think one of the benefits of cloud connectivity, of course, is that you're starting to get a lot more insight on what's happening to products in the field, right? A lot of the stuff that we do is either used at the home. I'd say the majority is used at the home. Some of it is used at clinics. Most of it is not large capital equipment. I would be curious, Pasha, because I know some of my clients experience some of this stuff where devices are used at home, and they may need to go somewhere for either servicing, or if there's a field failure, there's some root cause analysis for failures that needs to be performed. I'm curious if that's stuff that you guys do, and if you guys handle, for example, things like sterilization of products that have been out in the field and have come into contact with patients.
Oh yeah. So we don't work too much with like what I'll call the residential space as it relates to medical devices. So it's typically what I'll call like the B2B environment. So it's clinics, ophthalmic clinics, radiology practices, hospitals, laboratory environments. In regards to your question of, yeah.
Can I stop you and ask specifically then, just to add to that?
Sure.
If it's a device used in the home, you're not the guy. True or false?
We typically don't deal with home devices, yeah. Those are a little bit of a different product set than we're accustomed to.
Thank you. Please continue.
Yeah. But to answer your question, we do have, when it does come to decontamination, yes, that's a core part of what we do. Devices that are coming through any of our facilities, they may be exposed to bloodborne pathogens, right? So we have decontamination rooms at all of our service centers that allow us to go through a decon process using a fume hood or using like these Clorox wipes. It's essentially whatever the OEMs, whatever their SOPs are to decontaminate a product, we abide by that, but we have the facilities to be able to do such. An interesting point too that I'll mention on the IT component, right? It's not all about on-site. I'll give you an example, right? So one of our clients is one of the leaders in the laboratory automation space. So when you go, the lab sampling that gets done for COVID or for blood testing, these clinics are running 24 hours a day, okay? So one of the biggest challenges that we've heard about from some of our clients is nowadays, a lot of these clinics and hospitals will give to these device manufacturers like a virtual machine within their practice to load their application. And so one of the huge challenges that we've seen with our OEMs is they're essentially being held accountable for the client's infrastructure, meaning those virtual machines are essentially set up with a certain amount of bandwidth. I don't know how technical people are here, but I'll try to break it down real easily. So, you know, if you think about a computer, right? There's an operating system on a computer, and basically it's a one-to-one relationship. So basically, with the advent of virtualization, you can now take one piece of hardware and you can have different stacks of operating systems sitting on that one physical device, and that allows you to use the power on that computer a lot more efficiently. The challenge is what's happening is these clinics and these hospitals are solely responsible for dedicating the amount of power these virtual machines could use. And so if they don't give it enough, what I'll call juice to perform, what happens is it impacts, what I'll say the OEM's application. So in this case, the client that we're working with today, they have an application that connects to what's called the laboratory information system. And they're processing, hundreds, if not thousands of samples daily. And if there's anything that goes awry within the computer network of the clinic, or there isn't enough memory given to their application, their application starts performing very poorly. So what we've done is actually we've installed monitoring agents on their behalf, and we're essentially getting firsthand feedback in terms of where these bottlenecks exist. And then we alert our client, which is the OEM, where there's deficiencies with the infrastructure that was allocated to them. And so that now they're able to get in front of the curve here and actually have a discussion with the customer to ask them to give them more resources on their environment, because they have really no alternative. So we've seen a lot of that going on, Jose, which is pretty interesting. And that seems to be a common gripe with clients that are installing applications on, call it hospital premise systems.
So your role in that is going to the facility, installing maybe the updated software, and then also on the back end monitoring.
Yep, we do. It's a remote deployment. Yeah, so we do both, right? So we do the physical installation on site, but with these remote monitoring agents that we have, they're essentially remotely deployed. So we create a package, and the package is essentially white labeled for our OEM client. So it's essentially like a utility now that they can install on the virtual machine. And it's essentially giving them all the insight into everything outside of their application that they may not have seen before. So how the operating system is performing, if there's network issues, if a firewall goes down, if their internet service provider is not working. In Europe, that seems to be, we've seen that in Belgium and some of the other countries where some of these clinics, their ISPs go intermittently down, but then there's a connectivity issue, and then our clients are getting a call from the lab saying, hey, your system's not connecting, what's going on? And they're just trying to scramble to figure out what's going on. So they burn a lot of time just trying to weed through to see, is it their stuff that's the issue, or is it the customers? So we're essentially cutting through all that to give them that direct insight.
Cool.
Rick? And by the way, Lee, think about maybe raising your hand or leaving a comment of thinking that what you're working on makes sense to have a discussion with Pasha. If you agree, show yourself. Mr. Stockton.
Well, actually, this is partially answered, but my question, and whenever I get together with somebody and I don't 100% know what they do, I always ask two questions. And one is, if I'm in a group of other professionals, how will I know I'm listening to one of your potential customers? And to be more exact about that, I'll say, what complaints and gripes will I hear that make me want to say, you should talk to my friend Pasha, he can solve your problem. And already I'm picking up on some of them where it might say, our product is a computer interface or application, and we're having bandwidth problems. In other words, it's not running very well. It's slowed down. We have outages or delays, something like that. But that I think is probably just one of the things which would tell me you should call Pasha. Can you tell me some of their other complaints, stuff that I'm going to hear them say?
Yeah, so the example that I gave is really as it relates to what I'll call off-the-shelf systems that are part of the client's ecosystem, right? So in the example that I gave you, that OEM has like a laboratory diagnostic device sitting in these clinics processing blood samples. And oh, by the way, you have to control it with this piece of software that sits on, a computer, right? So that's an important part of their ecosystem, but it's not their primary device, right? So it's, again, if you look at the overall value that we're trying to provide for our clients, it's allowing them to, again, focus on what's important to them, their core competency, right? In this case, they make these very highly specialized, hematology systems, as an example. All the other stuff is ancillary, but it's necessary for their system to function properly. So we're trying to help, again, our clients focus on core competency. So as it relates to compute related stuff, right? That's one aspect. The other aspect is we actually do interface with their devices. So again, we're doing field services on their behalf. And so problems that we see when it comes to actually a medical device is our clients cannot keep up with installation demand, right? Right now, because of the COVID restrictions that had happened, we've seen an influx of orders come in for, devices, different types of devices. And our clients don't have enough manpower to install these products. So they want to be able to generate revenue quicker and get the customer up and running, but they don't want to go hire a bunch of people to go do this. And so you kind of, there's a catch-22, right? You can't go bring like temp labor off the street to do this because there's a whole training protocol, there's a quality protocol you have to comply with. So how do you bridge that gap? How do you get access to field service personnel that understand quality systems, that can follow a certain set of procedures to install a medical device out in the field without having to incur all the overhead costs and the training that may or may not be short-lived, right? So that's a gap that we try to bridge because we have an entire program that essentially provides device manufacturers access to these field service technicians that can do that type of work. And
that's so funny.
Mhm.
That is so cool because you do with technology what I do with the design.
Mm-hmm.
I knew there was something familiar I was hearing
Yeah,
about what
yeah.
you were doing, and I just couldn't put my finger on it.
Sure.
So you get them
I'm
the
not very good at
resources. So
articulating things, according to Joe.
it's a challenge. It really
It
is.
Yeah.
You're not only talking to people who know what you're talking about, but you're also trying to communicate with people who have no idea.
Yeah,
They're
it
just
is.
they have their thing they do, and it's
Yes.
not IT and it's not service.
Sure,
You know,
exactly.
it's tough. Yeah.
So that's one aspect, and I'm trying to break it down. And the other thing is the service center. So really interestingly, I heard this earlier about distributorship. So we have a lot of large device manufacturers that we work with today in the US and in Europe. And the challenges that we see are emerging markets. And what I mean by that is right now, a lot of and I'm not saying all, but I'm saying there's a good portion of device manufacturers that sell into these emerging markets like in Asia or Latin America through distributorship. So one glaring thing that we noticed in our discussions is when they do sell through distributorship, they have absolutely no clue how these devices are performing, what's failing, what's the mean time between failure. Because usually the first question we ask is, well, can you tell us, how many devices are being repaired on an annual basis? And they're like, well, we don't know. The distributors handle that. And they just basically supply them with the product and they cross their fingers. So we always ask, well, like, how do you know how your device is performing? How do you know how your brand is performing in these markets? Do you have any idea? And a lot of times it's, well, no, if we're selling product, we assume it's doing well. But, I'm a believer of, no news is not necessarily good news. And I think, these OEMs should have insight into this information. And unfortunately, just I think traditionally working with distributors, that has not been something that's been demanded of them. They're just hoping they can sell the product. So we have brick and mortar facilities in these areas, and we kind of become the intermediary. And this is what we've been pushing a lot, is to let us kind of be that conduit, or these service centers now in these regions where they don't have direct presence, and let us now touch these devices on your behalf, even in partnership with your distributors. And that way we can share the data with you. We can share with you what's failing, what type of parts are going bad. Are there common failures and defects that your engineering teams need to be aware of? And that way it can go through the proper engineering change notice process, and they can make design changes or find more robust parts so that it minimizes the failures and, again, improves the experience the customers have with the product, right? Because you can have a great design product, but if it's failing periodically, I mean, it hinders the client's ability to actually service patients, and that leads to poor customer
Allow me
experience.
to direct you to a tangible example. Lee, would you tell him just a bit about what you're working on?
Sure. Well, we built a platform, probably an overused word, that will take in a variety of digital portable devices, med tech devices. Our first one we built in-house, but we're bringing in devices, some built in-house, some out-of-house. The initial in-house device uses 20 sensors that will do in 4 seconds 3D scanning of the human body for a volumetric assessment to do a digital, we don't use the word diagnostic, and a digital therapeutic. We don't use the word therapeutic, but we're basically assessing the human body, looking at all body shift tilts and rotations and body types and posture. It's really a postural assessment. With that, we've been able to what we would say untangle the body. So we could basically give a recommendation of exercise routines. That could either be done directly from the email to your device. Basically, by the time you walk out of the device, you have a recommendation waiting for you in your email of 6 exercises to be done a week, each for 6 weeks, or until you're scanned again.
Might I gently guide you to help us understand a bit more concretely? I think you have a great big box a person walks into, and then what happens?
If you like to understand it from that point of view,
I want to give him a visual about
Oh, I
like,
totally get it. It's like a body scan at the airport, right? When you go and you put your hands up and it does a scan. And this tells you, for instance, what exercises you can do. If is it looking at your muscular? Is it looking at your skeletal? Is it looking at your muscles? What is it? How?
it's looking at your body, posture, shape, shift, tilts, and rotations
Okay.
by using scans. And there's, in this particular rig, there's 20 sensors in there. So
Are these
within,
all optical, like they're camera sensors?
they're 3D FCC class 1 lasers,
Okay, got it.
but there's no radiation whatsoever.
Yeah, cool.
And but what happened is we were invited to show that in a rural community at a utilities annual board meeting through the state of Wyoming. And we were told to expect 30 to 40 people to be there. We took a prototype out there, and we had 160 some people wait in line,
Mhm.
others for hours. Then they started asking, well, what else can you measure? And as we looked around the world from I'll call digital stethoscopes and non-contact blood pressure and heart monitoring, and uh, other metabolic types of sensors, and the way there are simple digital EKGs on the market these days. And as we looked at more and more of the devices that were out there, we realized that we could, let me use the word, cobble together
Mhm.
a lot of different devices into one experience for people in rural, underserved communities worldwide. So we're under contract right now with a company in India that has a service population now of 8.5 million people. There's already won 1.1 million people through the system. And we are under deep discussions in the MENA region as well, while we're rolling out through rural America. So we'll go rural America, India, and MENA simultaneously, with basically being a platform to bring together as many digital devices that are out there. We find that most of these devices are really brilliant, but they're really in search of a market because there's no national buyer of any of these devices, whether it's a sonogram or for prenatal or others. But there's lots of people, like I buy all these devices and I put them in, I try to break them. But sometimes I find the user interface is really inconsistent and really hard to figure out. I don't think that there's a lot of people like you and Joe and Rick and Donovan and other people showing up on my screen who like to buy devices to experiment with them or put them in a closet. Most people don't like to buy things that they never need. But um,
I should introduce you to my son.
ah,
but yeah, I'm saying it's a luxury hobby to be able to buy devices and things that you play with for a while. They become obsolete, and we're just finding that in these rural communities, this platform uh, has become extremely welcome. And we were just looking to democratize and uh, um, muscular skeletal pain elimination.
Lee,
So
quickly, Jan Sugar asks, who is your device most useful for?
Oh, that's interesting. Anybody that, well, there's two,
Anybody is a bad way to start, I think.
yeah, I would say muscular skeletal is the category of the initial device. The platform will be available for being able to create longitudinal data for predictive analytics.
So where would you place one of these things? Like, is it supposed to go like in a CVS or something? Or
Well, right now we're moving them into utilities in rural communities that are servicing the rural communities. They could also work with primary healthcare clinics in order to give lots of data for the physician. With saving time with more data. And the way that the system is designed for the ML, there's 4 portals that come out of it. One is the user can get a direct report, which we call the user portal. The second is a corporate portal, which we call a partner portal. So it could go into corporate wellness programs or into health clinics that they could manage their own portal. The third is an administrative portal that will let us manage, up to 100,000 different machines around the world, where we know where they are, how they're functioning, and we can break down everything into demographics by age, by condition, by job description, by zip code, any different way. And the fourth portal is the most important. It's a provider portal where we could send the information directly to a provider for them to accept our recommendations or for them to modify our recommendations and send it off to their patients. So it has the functionality of either being unique to a user or through a provider.
Thank you for that.
So,
Pasha, when you hear this
go ahead.
value proposition, how would your organization work, if at all, with something like this?
Well, obviously, yeah, placing the devices would be something that we would try to assist with, depending on the level of complexity. And then, it's electronics and electromechanical, right? So they have use. I don't know what the wear and tear is on this. I don't know how many you guys have deployed, Lee. But ensuring that they're functioning, they're calibrated, right? Those are all, I'm assuming, important aspects of your device because they work with lasers. To ensure that they're giving the proper results, right? So that's something that would
we could identify the calibration on a scan by scan basis. We get a checklist to make sure that it is calibrated.
Yep.
We keep people in the machine for an extra 23 seconds, actually, by just talking to them about things with a video in front of them. And what we're doing then is making sure that we got the image, because we don't want them walking out of the machine. And Joe, I could also bring up on a share, if you wanted, a video to show what the total experience is like.
More than I want to do with Pasha's time today.
And
Perhaps in a separate week we could do that.
But Pasha, it's basically, so the admin portal will basically let us see everything that's going on, but we keep the people in there for about 23 seconds longer than they need to be in there, just so we can make sure that all the images, we grabbed all the images, because if we have to take it again because they moved the wrong way or something happened, then we don't want them to go out and have to come back in and reset. So we keep them engaged to make sure that by the time they walk out of there, their phone rings and there's a text waiting for them to click. That'll take them to all of their results.
What type of issues have you seen? I don't know if this is like in like a prototype phase, or are you guys in production? What have you seen in terms of issues with the device from a reliability standpoint? Full production.
It's out there in multiple locations. We've run about 6,000 people through it, so we're pretty comfortable with it. And there are multiple devices out there, because we're actually working with a clothing manufacturer in Hong Kong that has a facility in the United States as well. But what they do is they use this type of device not to create a shirt for Joe, but they do mass manufacturing to an audience of one for people like the United States Navy. All the uniforms are the same, all the fabrics the same, everything's the same, except those. They will basically create all the measurements for all the uniforms in one straight shot based on it. We've just added a lot of landmarks to it that permit us to do it. It's everything solid state, so we have no real problems at all. The problems that we have had, oddly enough, it has been the USB extension cords have gone faulty. So getting from the sensor to the computer everything is done locally and then sent up to the cloud. But it's been USB extension cords, and that's been oddly
That's the
enough.
kryptonite, huh?
Oh, it's so crazy. I mean, everything else works except this one wire.
Yeah, it's funny how we see that, in a lot of different types of devices. Is there's always this little single point of failure that can potentially bring the whole thing down, which is pretty interesting. So identifying that, yeah, and trying to design around that is important.
Because we have 20 sensors, we have 20 extension cords. We've had one one sensor go bad, nothing else goes bad. It's all plug and play.
Yeah.
Rick, I know you wanted to add something, and I just heard him say he has 20 extension cords, and I'm no designer, but that doesn't sound optimal.
Yeah, that's something for a longer phone conversation, because often the simplest solutions involve a good conversation about what's going on. But I was thinking in terms of that product, Pasha, and the service that you provide. I was just talking with a friend of mine from Central America, and I was helping her with her English colloquialisms because she's in marketing research. Um, and so it reminded me, let's say that this device is implemented down in Central South America, and they're having some communication problems. In other words, the Spanish or Portuguese interface is not really great. Do you have people in some of those areas who would be able to work interactively with the patients and help straighten out those communication problems, or at least document them? If someone has an interface issue
Yeah.
that is language and cultural based. So put it in the short word.
Yeah, no, totally get it. Yeah.
Yeah.
We do some clinical type training work for devices we install here, like we do it for dental manufacturers. We actually have the clinical trainers go through that process that you mentioned, but we don't see a huge need for that right now in like Latin Central America. So we have not set up to do that level of work. It's more on the technical side rather than the UI and the clinical training side of how to use the device. So it's a lot of our projects and programs are based on volume needs, et cetera, right? So just because it is a smaller density over there, we haven't necessarily seen it and had set up for it. But I agree with that challenge and how that would exist.
Donovan, you've been patient. Did you want to come back on and add something?
No, everything was answered. Thanks.
Okay, bye. Jan, you had something about packaging?
Oh, I was just agreeing that the extension cords and all types of other connectors, I see those causing a lot of problems for medical devices. And from what I can tell, it's mainly because they don't do their packaging and testing properly in the first place to make sure they don't have an issue.
Oh,
So
well,
it's just,
remember that we're coming out of the clothing industry, and it's been for them. They don't have all of the same packaging. We're in the process now of actually, because we've been able to identify all of the landmarks, so precisely now with enough history in there, we're actually moving this into two sensors with iOS devices and with two particular locations set 90 degrees apart. Right now, as of the testing last week, we're able to get this to a 94.8% accuracy. It's not good enough for us, but we'll be moving into a more mobile version as well, so that it'll be able to operate on a hub and spoke basis. But the correlations and the landmarks, we're highly confident we'll be able to make all that work so that we can move mobile fairly soon.
no, I was talking about, you said extension cords and that kind of stuff was causing you issues. And those tend to have issues because the vibration and shock and environmental conditions are not tested ahead of time to make sure that you don't have an issue. So that's what I work on, is physical things.
Yeah.
Or even your unit there, it's got to have screws, joints, and other things. Those kinds of tests to make sure that it can actually survive shipping is something that's good to do.
Yeah, no, we agree with that.
Thank you, everyone, for that. I thought giving Pasha a real live case would help us understand kind of his value prop and how he goes about things, and I think we accomplished that. Pasha, where else would you like to take us with your?
I'd like to say, yeah, Pasha, we'd be more than happy to invite the opportunity to have further discussion, because we're in a discussion right now, two separate discussions. One is to possibly put 5,000 units in place over the next 48 months. And the other is to move into a population of a few million clients through one distribution network. And we're going to have to harden all of this in order to and build that backup support network. We don't intend to build that in-house.
All right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that would be great, Lee. Joe, I can finish off by kind of going over a quick case study to kind of show you what we did for one of our customers, if you guys
Sure.
are interested to see that.
If you have slides, you're
I
welcome.
do have a slide. Let me know if you guys can see it.
We can, thank you.
All right, so this is an interesting case study that we wrote up. So I'll give you guys a quick overview. So this client of ours is the leader in the patient monitoring and therapeutic space. So they make monitoring devices, and they ran into an interesting situation where they were moving their U.S. based headquarters to a more populated area with higher real estate costs, and they decided that it was not, they essentially wanted to part with their service center that they had that for 25 years. Okay. And so their goal was to refocus on, again, core competency and innovation and experience, and again, leveraging a world-class infrastructure, which is ours, that had already been set up. So we went through and we kind of pitched them on our network, what we do, how we operate, and they liked the concept, right? So we went through the whole courting process, and we were successful in winning their bid. And then so now comes the executional part. So their objectives that they outlined for this project is essentially to transition 6 of their product families in 120 days due to this move of their US-based headquarters. They wanted minimal customer disruption during this transition. They wanted to maintain post-transition to us the highest level of quality customer satisfaction. And then they wanted a really stringent process to validate this transfer, or this transition of service center, right? Because you're kind of moving this thing as you're supporting customers, so it could be kind of hairy. Because you don't want your clients to experience any type of impact during this type of a move. And then again, the kicker was they wanted to see all of this done with a huge reduction in cost and improvement in productivity, right? So that was a challenge that they had provided to us, and we accepted. So we essentially implemented, for the quality people that may be on this call, we went through an installation qualification and performance qualification product per family, and all that is essentially you're testing your facility and servicing their device in small increments to make sure there's no gaps in the process. So we implemented that with them. We essentially transitioned and streamlined the entire process, and during this we identified a lot of gaps that they had in their documentation, a lot of tribal knowledge that they had no documentation for, because obviously things were now coming over into our purview. We were able to kind of ask them where documentation was for things they were training us on. So we identified a lot of gaps midstream during this transfer. And then ultimately what we gave them was an outcome-based service model. So essentially they are now just paying us a flat rate to process each of their devices. If you compare that to how they were doing it, they had to carry their facility costs, they had to pay their employees, their service technicians, they had to deal with overtime a lot of times. And it's, the turnover. So again, these are deviating from what this company exists for, which is building the greatest type of patient monitoring technology. And now they're having to deal with, all these other issues that come about to service that product. So this is kind of the case that was outlaid to us. And then let's fast forward to today, what their before and after scenario was. So if you look to the left, you'll see what their infrastructure was for their service center. They were essentially operating this service center with 30 people. They had allocated 16,000 square feet of space to run this operation to support their customers. And their average turn time to return products back to their customers. So when a customer ships a product to them to get fixed and sent back, was averaging about 10 days. So if you look to the right, is essentially the benchmark of what we're doing for them today. So we're doing it with 13 people, and this is essentially a dedicated operation for them. We're doing it in 3,000 square feet of space. And again, we're incentivized for our clients to run these projects as efficiently and as densely as possible, because our goal is to maximize our utilization rates that we have internally, meaning we can use more of our space for multiple customers, right? So we're incentivized again to use less space as much as possible. And then if you look at the performance aspect, we're averaging about four business days. Actually, we're actually down to 3 right now, but 4 business days, 4 days to turn the product back to the customer. So they essentially gained a 60% reduction in cost and improvement in time productivity with 57% less resources. So that was a huge thing that we accomplished for them. And it's something, again, that we can do over and over again for device manufacturers. A lot of times they're just not aware that organizations like us exist.
Which is why one of the first questions I asked you was, who's your competition? Because while few, if any, on the call knew who you or your company were earlier today, if you were to name, I don't know, leader in the space, or what people think about when they think of the concept that you represent, they'd be like, oh, you mean like Nike shoes? I know what a shoe is.
Yes.
Like who? So who would you cite?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned this a little earlier. So like Flextronics and Sanmina and these guys, they do contract manufacturing. They also do service. They don't do field service. There isn't really an all-encompassing solution provider like us. There are players that do field. There are players that do like a service center in the U.S. And then when you look at Europe, that becomes a lot more fragmented. Right now, we're going through a project with one of our clients that's huge in the infusion space. And what they're looking at is they have like 3 service providers in each country in Europe, and so it's hard to manage and provide oversight to these like localized service providers that they're using to do parts of the work that we're doing. So their goal is to consolidate the number of suppliers that they have. So there are a lot of different players that do bits and pieces of what we do. What we've done is we've kind of taken all the challenges and put them under one roof to allow our clients to leverage that not only here domestically, but also within other global markets. And so, yeah, I say that we are a differentiator. There aren't too many organizations that do what we do. And that's just because of accumulation of experience that we've had in trying to, again, craft these solutions that can solve these challenges.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Sure.
What would you leave us with, or is there another area you'd like to?
No, that's it. I think it's really kind of these things again. The topic of the discussion was customer experience, right? And again, the only way you can improve customer experience is by focusing on your product and focusing on the things that are a priority for you, right? So it's again your product development, your customer. So what we excel at, what we focus on is service delivery, service execution. So our primary goal is to just again offload the things that are essential but yet non-core to device manufacturers' business, and again develop that partnership that can allow them to enhance that customer experience over time by again leveraging our infrastructure, not having to build it all in house, and again allowing them to grow at a more rapid pace.
And you pretty much captured why I wanted you to speak today, because there's no one else in the group, or frankly anyone that I've encountered in my decade serving the medical devices group that does precisely what you do, and it sounds incremental.
Excellent.
So I wanted to share what you had to say with my audience. So
Thank you.
for doing that.
All right, and I'm happy to answer any other questions if there are any. But it was great connecting with you, Joe, and meeting the team here. And look forward to doing it again soon.
It sounds to me as though you have a follow-up call with Lee coming up at a minimum.
Send me a note, Lee. Let's connect.
You're both on Slack. And Jan is speaking next week. She's a fan favorite, and we're going to talk about whether what she does is a luxury or a necessity. I think I know the punchline because it's kind of what she does for a living, but she's going to explain why. And she's a great speaker. So thanks, everyone, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
Pasha, very much.
No problem. Pleasure. Enjoy your weekend.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.